Hey kids, how about a Valentine story? Smitten, a lint-free love story by David Gordan. It's a good story. It's about friendship. Smitten, finding someone who's different than you. One cold afternoon, a mitten sat atop a fence post. "Sir," Mitten called out. A man bustled by with a basket overflowing with laundry. "Something has fallen out of your—" And there on the ground lay a single sock. So he was going along. Lost a sock. Sock barely stood up before a bunch of kids trampled on him. "Are you okay down there?" "Oh, I'm used to being walked on," Sock said with a cheerful voice. "Hey, what are you doing up there? All by yourself?" "Oh, well, I used to be a part of a pair," Mitten said sadly. "Now I'm alone and lost." "Wow," said Sock. I guess I am too." Mitten jumped off the fence post. "Without my right mitten," she said. "Well, I'm just a left." Sock was neither a left or a right, but he knew what she meant. "We've got to find our other halves," he said. As they set off through the park, Mitten covered her nose. "What's wrong?" Sock asked.
"Oh, well, I hate to break this to you," said Mitten, "but you don't smell so good."
It was a dirty sock. All of a sudden, Mitten was caught, flipped, and flung through the air, and she landed in the trash. "Hey, what are you doing up there?" Sock called. Sock pushed and pushed until the garbage can fell over. Mitten tumbled out and brushed herself off and grumbled. "Oh." Sock wrinkled his nose. "Now who doesn't smell so good?" By now, Mitten was cold, dirty, and downright annoyed. They passed a grocery store and then a pet store, and Sock stopped right in front of a laundromat. It was closed, but he had an idea. "Let's sneak inside and get clean." Mitten shrugged and followed. Look at, he's so thin. Right underneath the door. "Wow," they whispered in awe. The shiny machines towered above them like skyscrapers.
"Too bad we don't have any money,"
Mitten said.
"Don't worry,"
said Sock, and he wriggled under the dryer. 4 quarters, pew, 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 shot out. Sock emerged, smiling and covered with lint. Mitten couldn't help but giggle. Do you ever go searching for anything underneath your dryer? Ugh. Lost toys.
"Mitten, the water's perfect. Come on in,"
Sock called as he bobbed in the bubbles. Even Mitten had to admit it looked pretty fun. She tested the water and then eased herself into the warm, soapy suds. Look at her. She's testing it with her toe. Or then the two played, splashing until ding! The wash cycle was done. "Well, we better get dry," Mitten said, and she put a quarter in the dryer. They spun around and around. "Yippee!" Sock shouted. But when Sock tumbled out, he was not only very dizzy, but he had shrunk small enough to fit a baby doll. Oh no.
"You should have told me that you were made of wool,"
Mitten muttered. Well, they made their way out to the sidewalk, and Sock was so tiny that he fell behind. Mitten doesn't look very happy, because when you wash wool, it shrinks. Well, when you dry it. Suddenly, two dogs jumped out of the corner and they grabbed him and they stretched and they pulled and they tugged him. Sock 10 times his size.
Put my friend down,
yelled Mitten, charging back to the rescue. The dogs were so surprised they dropped Sock and they took off. I'd be surprised too if I had a Mitten talking to me.
Oh, I don't feel so good,
Sock moaned. Well, yeah, he's all stretched.
What would you do without me?
Mitten sighed and threw him over her whole shoulder. The Mitten couldn't see where she was going, and she walked right over a metal grate, and she and Sock fell through the holes. Down they tumbled, thumb over heel, through the darkness. I wonder where they're going. They landed on the subway tracks. Mitten started to cry.
Now I'll never find my other half.
Don't worry, Mitten. We'll be all right,
Sock said.
Oh, no, we won't,
Mitten shouted, pointing at the giant lights bearing down on them. Oh no, they're in the subway. It's a subway train. The train zoomed over them and caught one of Mitten's threads that got caught under the undercarriage. She unraveled into one very, very long piece of yarn.
I don't feel so good, Mitten said.
Don't worry, Mitten said. I'll be right here,
said Sock. He gently gathered her up into a ball and hopped up the subway train. Look it. He is just helping her every single time, and she's been helping him. Taking care of him too. After a lot of searching, Sock finally found a knitting place and snuck in, grabbed a set of knitting needles and a good how-to-do book.
I'll fix you right up, Mitten.
This will never work,
Mitten moaned. But Sock kept knitting through the night to put his friend back together. Have you ever been a friend like that? The sun was rising, and by the time Mitten saw her reflection in the hubcap, Sock wasn't the best knitter in the world, but despite all her new lumps and bumps, she still looked like a Mitten.
You did great, Sock,
said Mitten.
Well, what are friends for?
Sock smiled. Yeah, she doesn't quite look like a Mitten. Well, kind of, sort of. She's a little fuzzy now. But she is back together. They walked up to the department store window and looked inside. Every sock and mitten and glove had a match. They all looked so happy, but that's when Mitten realized something.
After everything that we have been through, I think we make the perfect pair.
And the two friends hugged. And then, from then on, they were smitten. What do you get when you put a sock and a mitten together? You get smitten. Friends forever. Boys and girls, true friendship makes perfect pairs. You guys have a happy Valentine's Day and give someone a hug or find a new friend.